Hello. It's just above freezing temperatures outside, but this is where I'm sitting, because it's too loud inside. Isn't that some BS? BS with S.A.C. Now, when last we left off, William was running a lot. He was trying to get to the town center to speak with the village elders because his home was on fire. He was taking his secret path through the woods because he needed to warn them about the kobalds that were attacking the village. And that's really about all we got. A little bit of flashback before the story proper starts. And that brings us up to now. Chapter 3, Process of Elimination. Wait, kobalds? Olivander stared in amused disbelief. With all the fear and the sweat that covered the kid like a homemade quilt on a winter's night, for a moment Olivander actually worried that there might actually be some serious problem for which he was actually needed. Yeah, the boy said, face full of terror and guilt. His voice trembled when he spoke anything longer than a word. His deep brown gaze hung distant and anxious behind the dark circles that surrounded his eyes, like the mask of a bandit out to steal all the world's woes for himself. The boy William reeked of exhaustion, tired from running, tired from hiding, tired from worry. Road dust clung firmly to his skin and tattered clothes, glued on with the sweat of a dozen days' hard running. The boy's already thin features, framed by unruly wisps of stringy hair, only appeared thinner as his sunken eyes and the dirt on his cheeks suggested a hollowness and lifelessness of a much more ancient, probably undead individual. Olivander could tell at a glance he'd been sleeping, when he slept at all, in ditches and forgotten barns. Anyone could. The smell of livestock and the flecks of straw and the rumpled wrinkles of his garments made it impossible to miss. All that trouble, all that sorrow, and for what? Kobolds! Little guys, look like angry puppies, bright as unpolished rocks. Seriously? Olivander struggled to stifle a laugh. Yes, William cried, tears beginning to run down his cheeks. His fingers slid through his dark, stringy hair, his head propped up on his dirt-caked hands. I was ditching my chores. The chickens could wait, and I thought maybe catch some rabbits so my family, could have a nice stew for dinner. But I saw them camped over by the North Pass, and I ran off. I figured someone else could get rid of them. I'm just a farm kid who apprentices with the blacksmith twice a week in exchange for free plow maintenance. I'm no warrior. How could I take them on? Throw a rock at them? Olivander offered. Breathe on them the wrong way. They're kobolds. They're who villains hire when they have a half-brass piece to their name and need 20 guys to guard an empty room, but don't want to spend a lot of money. They're still monsters. They have sharp teeth and claws and swords and... Kid, Olivander smiled, cutting him off and patting him on the shoulder. You know what the first lesson a hero learns is? Don't be so afraid. You'd be surprised how many monsters go down pretty easily when you stop worrying about every little thing you think every little thing you think they can do to you. I'm sorry you ran across 2 whole realms to get here. Borrow a sword from the blacksmith, screw your courage to the sticking place, and defend your village. It'll be a lot easier than you think. But there are so many of them, William cried softly. Too many of them. He stared at his reflection in the mug of beer in front of him, then blankly at the wall when he could no longer stomach the sight of his own cowardice. In my experience, there's no such thing as too many kobolds, Ollie smiled, reassuring him. Only not enough patience to deal with them. You really think I can take on a whole army of them? William asked, hope growing slowly in his voice. An army? His eyebrows raised slightly. Like 50? No, like a real army, William said. At least a few thousand. A few thousand? Olivander's jaw nearly dropped to the bar in disbelief. Yeah, probably more. It's hard to guess when there are that many, William said, hope quickly fading from his voice. Something about Olivander being surprised made him very nervous. They seemed pretty organized, too. The one in the blacksmith's tent kept pretty busy. They had a blacksmith's tent? Olivander propped his swimming head up on his fist as he processed what he heard. More than one, William said. I think I saw smoke from several forge fires, and I don't think one of those monsters could have made weapons and armor for the whole camp. His words began to quiver and stumble as he spoke. If even the legendary Olivander grew worried, what hope could a short farm boy possibly have of saving his town? There must be some wizard involved, the barkeep declared. Kobolds aren't notorious for their organization. On their own, you'll see maybe a band of 20, 50 with a strong chieftain. And they certainly don't forge their own weapons. But an equipped army? Something's afoot. Great, moaned William as his head sank down to the bar in despair. An army of kobolds and an evil wizard. I was afraid it'd be too easy. Relax, Olivander said with as much ease as he could muster. If experience has taught me nothing else, it's taught me that there's bound to be a shrine or a dungeon or tomb with some all-powerful sword or the helm of the gods or something nearby. I've never had to take out a sadistic baron without there being some equally powerful magic weaponry lying around waiting to be claimed. Really? William asked, the pendulum of hope swinging back in his favor. Sure, Olivander continued, happy to see the shift in spirits. He'd never cared for the warrantless panic and pessimism, and had in fact found the hopeless despair of the oppressed to be his least favorite part of adventuring. With every new village and hamlet, he heard the same old, "We're doomed this, and no one can save us that." It was all rather depressing, and ultimately unfounded. Someone, usually Olivander, would save them, and the foretold doom invariably proved little more than a minor inconvenience once the great hero finished his work. If he'd had a copper piece for every time some downtrodden farmer in some backwoods village proclaimed the end of the world because a goblin had stolen his chickens. Doom and death indeed. Olivander, William asked, is everything all right? Olivander's eyes stopped glazing over in recollection, his head twitching almost imperceptibly as he shook off the old dust-covered memories. Sorry, just thinking about days gone by, he mumbled. It's like I was saying. You just need to find the sacred shrine or whatever it is they have from where you're from. But, William protested, suppose, hypothetically, there weren't any tombs or ruins or anything where I'm from. What would I do then? Maybe, hypothetically, you overlooked something, suggested the towering barkeep. I haven't overlooked anything. I spent a lot of time not doing my chores. I know every inch of land up there. We don't have any caves or temples or crumbling remains of some castle. I've never even seen so much as an abandoned hut in the woods. Well, there has to be something. Maybe your town was built on top of the ruins. There are no ruins, fumed William, his fist weakly pounding the bar for emphasis. He was beginning to doubt the reputation of this alleged hero of heroes. So far, Olivander had yet to offer any meaningful insight that the boy hadn't already considered and dismissed. And he certainly hadn't offered any physical assistance. Barrowsend, Olivander mused. That's up in the North Country, you say? In the Sixth Realm? What about the Caves of Madness? That's where the Bow of Hyranius allegedly rests. No, the Caves of Madness are outside Barrowhead, and that's all the way on the other side of the realm. Oh, yes, my mistake, replied Olivander, his fingers stroking his beard. Well, you could get the scimitars of Erdoathan. His grave is just behind Dead Man's Falls. Dead Man's Falls are by River's End, not Barrowsend. Olivander squinted as his gaze drifted absently up and to the right. His mouth puckered and his beard stroking intensified. He used to be so good at geography. There's always... No, that's Barrowsend in the Fourth Realm, but then the Forest of Unending Peril, it burned to the ground. Gorthon the Thief was adamant against hiding any of his loot farther north than Middenheim, so that's out. See, it's hopeless without you. Olivander rolled his eyes a little. The pessimism of peasants. Does your village have any filthy but wise hermits? They're usually retired sorcerers or gods in disguise, you know, kindly guiding understated but promising youths to lives of fortune and glory. No such luck, muttered William, clearly growing tired of grasping at straws. Prophecies? For a farming village, asked William, what would the farming village have to prophesy? And lo, when the sun and moon shall align, a child shall be born who will grow a turnip the size of a man's head? The only prophecy you'll hear in my village deals with the behavior of cows in the morning and its relationship to the weather in the afternoon. Maybe you've got the talent, Olivander offered. I've seen lots of situations like yours, you know. Unexceptional kid, no offense, faced with extraordinary odds, suddenly realizes he possesses the potential to wield magic. Have you ever made things happen? A fire flare up when you're angry, or a hungry wolf seem to understand you when you told him to back off? I don't have the talent, William cried out, full of frustration. I don't have anything useful to bring to the table. All right, Olivander said, hands slowly pressing down at the air as though the subtle gesture might placate the boy. So here's what we're looking at. In your village, there are no wellsprings of power to capture, no mystic glades to corrupt, no font from which all the world's magic stems. The local economy is barely more than subsistence at best. On the whole, Barrowsend is completely unimportant, mystically, strategically, or economically. And yet, your village is on the verge of total destruction by an army of kobolds, the likes of which I've never heard of, and no one in your town possesses the ability to defeat it. No magic, no prophecy, no powerful strangers, no long-lost weapons of legend. Barrowsend could be wiped off the face of the Sixth Realm, and no one would notice. It is, in a word, expendable. William plopped his head down on the counter, his face losing all will to hold expression. His burning cheeks pressed against the cool wood, puckering his mouth out awkwardly like a fish gasping for breath on a ship's deck. Sad little pools of drool and tears puddled where his face lay. It's okay, William said with a deep sigh. It's not worth your effort. I'm sorry for taking your time, and I promise I'll be out of your hair soon, but I ran for a really long time to get here, and do you mind if I sleep a little before I head back for home? Or at least, whatever's left of it? Sure, room's upstairs, Olivander said, his eyes strangely distant but resolved. But don't sleep too long. I know, William said, forcing his defeated frame to its feet. He said a silent apology to Sarah and his family for not saving them. You've got other customers, paying customers who need it more. Olivander patted the exhausted boy on the back softly as he came around the bar. Anything more than a light tap might well break the kid in half. He slid William's arm over his shoulder and led him toward the stairs. Yes, customers true, he said, as he eased the boy up the steep, creaking steps toward one of the guest beds on the second floor. But we've got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Better we leave soon. We? William asked, a flash of life returning to his face. But I thought you said it didn't matter if Barrowsend fell. It doesn't, Olivander reassured him, and that's why I'm going to help you. I don't understand, William said, puzzled. I don't either, Olivander said, with flashing a devilish grin. But I'm dying to find out. They reached the top of the stairs, and Olivander used his free hand to open a heavy oaken door. The old brass hinges squeaked as it swung inward, revealing a fairly sizable room with 4 sturdy-looking bunk beds. The posts seemed strong enough to hold an ogre, each one crafted from a solid tree trunk at least a foot thick. The mattresses looked soft as clouds to William, who eyed them longingly, probably stuffed with warm straw, or if rumors of Olivander's wealth were to be believed, possibly even goose down. And on top of each one, a real pillow, and a thick, heavy quilt made from what looked to be wool, nothing threadbare. For added warmth, the southern wall bore a stone fireplace with its own flue to keep the smoke at bay. All at the foot of each bed stood 2 chests, footlockers, William presumed, to protect a person's things while he slept. One window draped with heavy green curtains looked out onto the stables just to the side of the tavern. A porcelain-white, claw-footed tub of hot water filled the corner between the fireplace and window. Wisps of steam that rose from the water's glass surface called to him like a siren song of sanity and sanitation. William eyed the tub back with a sort of lust that can only be felt toward the deep and profound sleep by a man on the verge of collapse. He reached his arms across his stomach to the ends of his shirt, took fistfuls of dirty cloth in each, and pulled the torn tunic from his unimpressive frame. William leaned a shoulder against a bedpost at his feet, fumbled with his boots. He could have plopped down on the bed and used his hands to remove his footwear, but felt confident that, had he sat on the bed for even a moment, sleep would be on him like a dragon on a treasure pile. Instead, he stood and tried his best to unbuckle them with his toes. Next came his pants, belt unclasped and slipping to the floor. He kicked the last bit of pant leg from around his ankles and stepped into the tub, relaxing for the first time in who knew how long. The heat of the water enveloped him, seeped into him, and took away all the tension, all the worry he'd packed into his small body over the past several days. He'd only intended to soak in the tub until the water cooled, but it didn't. He wasn't sure how the water stayed warm, but assumed it had to be magic. And why not? This was the Laughing Raven, the tavern of the legendary Olivander. If anyone could afford such luxurious magics for total strangers, it was he. After what could easily have been an hour or more, William reluctantly pulled himself from the tub's warm embrace and dried himself off by the fire. His eyes drifted about the room, deciding where to sleep. Though it was not yet sunset, already one of the beds seemed occupied by what William believed to be a dwarf, who appeared particularly dour, even in his sleep. He'd never seen a dwarf before leaving home, but he smiled in his own bleary-eyed way at how a body so small could contain an army's worth of surliness, unconscious and all. He decided it best to sleep in one of the top bunks as far from the angry dreamer as possible. The bed stood against the far wall, which meant it would catch the morning sun. Convenient, considering the early start he needed to make. He gathered his clothes and placed them in the footlocker as silently as possible, so as not to rouse the sleepy dwarf. Then, rung by rung, William climbed up the ladder to the top bunk. It was feathered, it was warm, and it soon overtook him. William would later swear he had never slept so well in his entire life. That's going to take care of us for today, but don't worry, we'll keep reading soon. Have good sleep. Cat, stop pushing stuff!